much, Chief Solomon, for your opening remarks. I always think it's very important for whichever communities or tour you're situated on to hear and have that welcoming. So I appreciate that very much. And so we're going to get started today with our panel. As you can see here, a couple of our panelists weren't able to arrive. Just the time of year, lots of people getting sick. So Chief Hardy and Kyle Moore, so they send their regrets, but we still have a lot of expertise on this panel, and I'm sure all of us are going to learn something new today. So yes, thank you very much for being here today. We're going to be hearing from these incredible speakers about their experiences working with and developing relationships between First Nation communities and the mining industry proponents. My name is Kimberly Rosa. I am the Mineral Development Advisor with Nokiwan Tribal Council. I am a member of Red Rock Indian Band and with family in the Jitiwapik, Saging, and Anishinaabe, Gull Bay First Nation, and a lot here in Thunder Bay. The slide that we have up here shows the 5 communities of Nokiwan Tribal Council. Nokiwan Tribal Council provides advisory services to these 5 First Nation communities on a variety of different topics such as education, lands and resources, and mining for my position, access to justice, the health and safety, and housing. So the 5 First Nations would start with Fort William First Nation, and this is where this conference is being held today. So Chimiigwech for allowing us to be here today. At the far north, we have Inimbigo, Saging, and Anishinaabe, which is also known as Lake Nipigon Ojibwe Nation. South of that, we have Bingwi, Niashi, and Anishinaabe, which is known as Sandpoint First Nation. The Jitiwapik, Saging, and Anishinaabe, which is Rocky Bay First Nation. And the farthest to the east is Netnezakavik Anishinaabe, which is Pic-Mogurt First Nation. So my role as a Mineral Development Advisor at Nokiwan Tribal Council is to provide support to these 5 communities in reviewing mineral exploration development consultation requests that have come in from the Ministry of Mines. So that is helping them review exploration plans and permits, closure plans, setting up meetings and supporting meetings with proponents, and providing educational outreach opportunities to the communities on geology, mining, and exploration. I've been working in the Indigenous consultation and engagement field for the last 10 years. I was previously working at the Ministry of Mines as a consultation support officer, and before that I was working at the Shkagwalk Council in a similar capacity to where I am today, helping them support the review of exploration plans and permits, but I also help them develop their GIS education program that brings GIS and GPS resources and educational resources into the schools. Prior to my working career, I completed a Bachelor of Education at Lincoln University and a master's degree at the University of Guelph, where I studied best practices for mine-related training and education programs for Indigenous communities. When I'm not at work, I've been trying to take up running, and I finished my first half marathon last year. It might be exciting for some, it's exciting for me. I'm trying to keep up with my 4-year-old son that I'm running around chasing every single day. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm getting my slides mixed up here. But today we are here really to hear from these panelists. So we are going to be hearing from 3 different perspectives: the First Nation perspective, the mining exploration perspective, and the drilling and the supplier perspective. We're going to discuss the benefits, challenges, and lessons learned about working together, and we hope that you leave here today with some new tools under your belt that you can implement when you're developing relationships with First Nations, Indigenous communities, and the mining industry. So from the First Nations perspective, we have Jordan Hatton. Jordan Hatton is the Director of Economic Development for Bingwi, Niashi, and Anishinaabe, Sandpoint First Nation, a formerly displaced First Nation that is in the process of rapidly developing its reserve lands on the southeast shores of Lake Nipigon. Jordan is responsible for all on-reserve infrastructure developments, housing and land management, on and off reserve business developments, including the Papasay value-added sawmill operations, forestry and mining agreements, employment and training matters, regional and multi-First Nation initiatives, and all off-reserve consultation matters. We do a lot. Jordan has been working with First Nations for the last 13 years in various resource development lands and economic development related positions, and currently sits on multiple boards for the community. He received his master's degree in political science at the University of Guelph in 2008, and enjoys spending time with his partner, family and friends, traveling the world, fishing, golfing, and heavy metal festivals. Thank you, Jordan, for being here. So Chief Marcus Hardy, he is unable to be here today, but I did want to put up a slide to show where Red Rock Indian Band, who he is the chief of. And then Jordan is Inwiniyashi and Anishinaabe, which is 2 communities up from there. Now, before introducing the other ones, I just wanted to put this map up to show the context of where First Nations are coming from with their day-to-day work. So this map shows green and orange. The light green are all active mining claims. So you can see it's pretty much covered in this area around Lake Nipigon. It's known to be one of the most highest explored areas even on Earth. And the orange is where there's either active permits or permits that have expired. So meaning there's been exploration or there's proposed exploration happening. So that means drilling, geophysical survey, line cutting, pitting and trenching. Activities that could impact these communities' Aboriginal and treaty rights. So I wanted everybody to keep that in context of the amount of work that's happening, and that's not just that's just exploration, and never mind actual mine developments and forestry and all other industries that's going on. So as we zoom a little bit here, we have the Gorge Lithium Exploration Project and by Balkan Mining. Valerie Pascali, she is representing Balkan today. Valerie has been working in sustainability, environmental, social, and governance, and community and Indigenous engagement in the mineral exploration and mining industry for 15 years. She is the founder of Modern Core, a company focused on partnerships and ESG support during the exploration phase of mining. Before this, Valerie was manager of corporate social responsibility at Goldcorp, now Newmont. Valerie is on the board of the Prospectors and Developers Association Canada, PDAC. The current chair of PDAC's Sustainability Committee, and the former chair of the PDAC's Diversion and Inclusion Working Group. She also sits on Agnico Eagle's Stakeholder Advisory Committee. Valerie works with companies and communities to establish effective and trusting local partnerships, develop responsible practices and processes, and achieve sustainable socio-economic development. And just cleaning up the map a little bit without all of the claims. We have our last, top left there, Major Drilling. So John Stringer, he is the representative of Major Drilling. John has been in the industry for over 31 years, and with the past 12 years being with Major Drilling. Over the past 10 years, this includes the position of Business Development Manager, Canada, and most recently has been promoted to Regional Manager of Eastern Canada in May 2023. Having worked throughout his career in various operational management roles, these various roles have allowed him to gather a wealth of knowledge not only about the drilling side of the industry, but the markets and various factors that affect business in Ontario throughout Canada. Welcome to all the panelists. And now it's time to hear from the panelists. We're going to be speaking for approximately 45 minutes, and then there'll be 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end, so please hold your questions until then. And I'm going to go sit with them, because I'm feeling pretty far away from them right now, but I'll get you started here, Jordan. So I thought it'd be best for the audience to first understand the relationship that was developed amongst the communities themselves. This happened before I even started at Nokiwin, and the 3 First Nations is Nimigo-Zaging Anishinaabe, Bingwi-Niashi Anishinaabe, Bijitiwabik Anishinaabe, and Red Rock Indian Band. So I'll get you to start there.
Sure. Thanks very much, Kim. This is working.
Yeah.
First of all, big wish to Chief Solomon for her opening and for opening words, and Fort William for having us here today. Good morning, everyone. I see a lot of partners and friends and folks I spent some time with yesterday at the Chanterelle, and it's nice to see some people here. Full disclosure, I'm not Indigenous. I've been working with directly for First Nations now though for about 16 years, and for BNA specifically for 14 years. So I've been around the block a little bit, but I like to state that off the hop because there's a lot of perspectives that I can bring, but a lot that I cannot as well. So and thanks Kim very much for hosting. So for BNA and its work, as Kim showed, it's absolutely littered. You don't use that word negatively, but with mining claims and with mining permits. BNA has always been in the mindset that working with its partners, and that includes its neighboring First Nations, is of critical importance. To me, and I've always stressed this as well with my chief and council, working with your neighbors streamlines processes. For the companies themselves, they don't have to have 4 different meetings. They can have one. You have everyone at the table. There's no feelings that there could be a potential side deal. It's just, to me, it's just the proper way to do things, and I think it really moves things forward. So that's something that BNA feels very strongly about, and it's always the way that we've operated. I've spoken a lot out west, and heard some of the perspectives out there about different ways that communities operate together, and I just kind of shake my head a little bit because the way we do things is equality. It's equal across the board. It's not distance to the property or size of the reserve or the population size of the community, or whether or not, in BNA's case, there's a very bad history where the community was displaced in the 20th century through flooding and through actually the dismantling, the burning down of the homes, and the destruction of the community to make way for provincial farms. So right now we're trying to rebuild from scratch, and we don't have a lot of people residing on the reserve right now. We have about 25 to 30 right now. It's growing every year, but as of 5 years ago, we had none. So that doesn't mean that BNA is in any less of a position than any other communities to be affected by mining operations in the territory because of its history, right? So I guess I just say that to say that that's the principle that we operate under, and it's worked very, very well for our region. Of course, there's complications, and we can speak to some of those today, but that's always part of my main role, is to make sure that we all come together, work together as one unit when we're working with no matter what the issue is, mining, forestry, or hydroelectric projects, whatever else is happening in the region. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Jordan. That gives a great reason for working together. But I think a lot of people in the room are probably like, how do you even start that, right? If the communities aren't currently working together, can you give a little background on how that started? And Kyla is talking a little bit about it, about how the tribal council was a bit involved with it before I started.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, Nokiwan's a great coordinating role, and the work that Kim does is extremely important, right? Bringing everyone together. Scheduling is half the battle, right? I mean, everyone's got a million things on their plate. With the funding that we do receive, it's not enough to hire as many people as we actually need at the community level to do the work that we do. So, having Nokiwan participate with us is critical. Thank you for doing that, right? In the case of Red Rock as well, they're not part of Nokiwan, but they are one of our neighbors. They have been scoped into a lot of these projects, speaking specifically on the mining front. So to me, I mean, as long as Red Rock is okay with having Nokiwan play that coordinating role, and I think they have their own mineral development advisor at Red Rock, they work together very well as well. So as long as we're all on the same page that we're going to work together despite being part of different tribal councils or potentially different treaty areas, I mean, whatever the situation is, that's the main result is a collective that we can trust one another and work together.
Yeah, and I think a lot for you guys, you have a close personal relationship a lot with these things, right? You've developed those relationships maybe before, and then we're having those relationships, hey, maybe we should start working a little bit more closely together because you've developed that already.
No, that's a good point. I mean, from a political level, this stuff has to be directed by the chiefs, right? I am not a political person, but at the same time, everything we do at the technical level is political, right? So, but yeah, I mean, we have a great relationship at the technical level, myself and my my counterparts, and Chief already being a chief, but he's at the table oftentimes with the tech folks. So yeah, we get along great offline as well as online. So that's really important, developing those relationships, making sure that we all get along. We solve issues that we might have offline and not in front of the proponents is really important. But at the end of the day, if there are issues that are intractable, it has to go up to the chief level or council level, because it's at the end of the day they have to actually make the decision to work together or to not work together. That's not up to myself or my counterparts. That's a political discussion.
No, that's great, and yeah, having the chief involved, the chiefs are busy doing other things, so we're pretty lucky that Chief Martin has been able to do that. But I want to do a shout out to Minister of Mine that they did just provide support funding for the Mineral Development Advisor, so that Adam Hutchinson, the MDA, he'll start fulfilling that role a bit more, I think, moving forward. You did talk a little bit about some of the challenges, but I'm just wondering if you could give me some examples of maybe sometimes that maybe the group didn't quite work as well together, or it didn't agree on things. Was there anything, or was there always kind of easygoing between them?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the struggles that the technical people face is what communities should be involved in what project, right? That's not a decision that the tech people really can make. That's very much a political decision. If a community is excluded or scoped in by MNDM, if it's, say they're excluded, that could be a political, fight that they're going to have with the ministry to get into a project that they feel they should be because they're impacted. So that we try to stay away from that, but at the end of the day, we are actively involved in those conversations. So that gets a little bit, I don't want to say it gets messy, but it's a conversation that has to be had. But there's so many things that we work together well on now, and I'll use the forestry sector for an example. Significant Forest Management Inc., and I see Scott here and Ryan. So that's a corporation that manages the significant forest. It's a 1 million hectare forest, and there's 4 First Nations. The 4 that we're talking about here today: Red Rock, BZA, ourselves, and AZA, that are 25% shareholders in that corporation. So there's another example where we work together, and there's others around the lake that we. So mining's not the only thing that we work together on, so I think the more projects that you have opportunities to collaborate on, the easier the conversations become.
Thanks so much, Jordan. So now we have a good understanding of the relationships with the First Nation communities. I wanted to bring it to the relationship with the companies. So Valerie, what were your initial thoughts when you first learned about this working group? And how did it change your company's engagement strategy? Helen?
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. So I work with a number of junior mining companies, and so we're in different parts of Canada, and sometimes when you come to a community and you first introduce yourselves and you want to have, you want to start building a relationship, it's really a process of understanding where is the community. Okay, let's see if that does it. Okay. You really have to understand how to build a strategy. You really do have to spend the time listening to where that community is at, what their views are, what their concerns are, and whether that's a group of communities that come together and talk about things or individual communities. And you really, like, a strategy is such a technical term, and everybody loves to have a formalized strategy. But in relationships, and I think Chief Sullivan talked about this, and I really appreciate the framing of this conversation around relationships, because a relationship is not a technical thing, really, and you're constantly investing in that relationship. You're learning and growing, and so your strategy is also learning and growing, depending on how things are going. But when you come to a project or to a group of communities or community around a project who has an understanding of what they expect from you as a company, they have a clear process that they want you to work within, it does help the company participate in a way that is very intentional and very collaborative, because they kind of set out for companies where it is that you expect them to meet you as a community or as a group of communities. So the strategy definitely was impacted in that, in the very first meeting, there was a very clear understanding of where we needed to be, how we needed to show up, and that's actually for a company who's mainly focused on, let's say, other things that can really help in the process, for sure.
That's great, because I bet it would be a little intimidating for a company to come in and have no idea and have to kind of figure it out for themselves to do that. Yeah, thank you so much. And now I'll move on to John with Major Drilling. And John, how did Major Drilling first begin engaging First Nations in the region and build positive relationships with them?
Well, first, thank you for the invite here today. I would say in this particular arrangement, Jordan and his team reached out to us. We weren't first boots on the ground sort of thing, but they had some wants. They had a very clear picture and path of what they were looking for suppliers and contractors. So when they reached out to Major, as organized as they were, as part of a team, the first call I believe was with Chief Hardy, yourself, and Frank, and it did very much like Valerie states. It made it very clear for us of what their expectation was, what we had to come in to do. So that's good for most suppliers, because you're not trying to farm it in. It makes the picture clear of what the expectation is. We were able to come to an agreement fairly quickly. Major has, over the past, I would say in my time with Major and a couple of years prior, but the last 14 years, we started very slowly, but we started working with Indigenous and Inuit groups across Canada. And so where we were 14 years ago to where this arrangement was with the group has grown exponentially. We've learned how to do our job better, how to engage better, how to be better when we're on the projects. So every time we run into a group like this, it makes it so much easier for us because the picture's clear. And we know that there's the backing of the communities, and we know who to reach out to and how to start the process.
That's great, and that actually leads to my next question for both Valerie and John. What do you think is the key to successfully building relationships? Like, I know there's a lot, but maybe the top one or two things that the audience can take away from to keep in mind when building relationships with. You can use this working group as an example, or First Nations in general, or Indigenous people in general.
Do you want to go first? Or?
I think back to relationships. Everybody's gonna have different interests, different activities, different focuses, but if you can put the relationship first, I think that really helps guide the rest of the process, because really when it comes down to it, there are some things that are, there's some numbers and technical, parts of the agreement, but at the end of the day, really all of this, it comes down to process, right? And how you treat each other in the process. And so relationships and respectful relationships, I think are definitely key to success. And then it definitely helps to have common goals. So in this group, there was a sort of a common goal to see success in exploration, and that definitely helps, for sure.
A couple things I might add to that is communication, trust. I think trust is the big thing. Being available. When a supplier is not always the first, well, we're typically not there until after the permitting stage. So a lot of the grassroots stuff has been laid and agreements are in place with the exploration companies, but the trust and the communication, when a call comes in, pick up the phone, let them know what's going on, invite them to. It's not always easy for communities to get out to see, as an example, a drilling program, but if the community wants to come out, then that communication between the group you're dealing with, in this case, drilling contractor, to be able to set up a visit, to be able to do those things, it's an eyes open type thing. So I think communication and trust are probably critical.
So many great answers. And I'm going to kind of pose the same question to Jordan that we heard from the proponent side of it, but from you, what would you say is the top 1 to 2 things for successfully building relationships with companies?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really answer better myself. I mean, trust and communication are 2 critical components. I think for the First Nations, there's other things as well that are critical, right? The environment is paramount, and I can't stress that enough. And to my counterparts at all three communities, but specifically in Rocky Bay, I know they have environmental monitors, right? That they can actually send out to the projects, and I believe Red Rock does have that ability as well, I think. We defer a lot to those communities as far as making sure that the work that's being done is done properly, right? So a good history of a strong environmental record is really important to the communities, and I know we had faced some previous issues on some of those properties. So knowing that Major had a really strong history of environmental records, nothing's perfect. When you're an international company, things are going to happen. But we, as long as those issues are properly mitigated and attended to, that's really important. And as well as the communities talk to one another, be it in other treaty areas or other communities around the lake or whatever. So, a lot of times you get a good sense of if a community or a company is a good partner, if a company, be it a supplier or a mining operator or an exploration company, are a good partner or not, right? So you have those conversations, and so you're kind of going in eyes wide open to make sure that you're making the right decisions on the partnership.
No, thanks, Jordan. And I'll just follow up a little bit with that too. Just from my own experience, the transparency is so important. Things will go wrong, could go wrong, will go wrong. And so when it happens, how do you work with the community to make sure that they know what's going on, transparent, and they can be part of the process of making sure it's cleaned up properly?
Yeah, I would just add anything. Yeah. Just if there's exploration companies in the room, I just wanted to make a note on this, because I think what happens is there's this fear around the environmental management piece that, if you goodness forbid, make a mistake, then, you're gonna be in trouble, or you're gonna get a bad reputation. But I think what I'm seeing a lot, which is really helpful, and I just wanna throw it out there, is how much communities and companies can actually work together on fixing potential environmental issues. And it's not a matter of like slapping on the wrist or something like that. It's actually, troubleshooting. And if you're a partner on, XYZ, then you're a partner on this as well. And I've worked on projects, not this one, where, there was a small spill. It was, absolutely, it was an accident, but communities came out to actually be part of the inspection. And where historically that would be like a huge, fear or seen like vulnerability for a mining company, especially a junior, that they actually were able to come out and help fix the problem. And it actually built the relationship further, because it built the trust to just be transparent about it. And even in the case here, when we were talking about like through the MOU process, I remember you were sort of talking about how you deal with like this group of communities deals with concerns around the environment, and it wasn't a sort of like it wasn't a disciplinary approach. It was a teamwork approach to help me fix that. So I just want to throw that out there, because I do think it's like not talked about as much in the mining space. It's just this sort of stigmatized as, you always have to be perfect in order to be seen as a good company. But if you're just, again, going back to process and involving everybody in the process of fixing these things or addressing these issues, that you can actually use it as a trust building exercise versus a disciplinary activity. Yeah.
That's so great. And I think it's just, when you're building a relationship, it's being vulnerable. And vulnerable is being open with those mistakes that you make, right? And that does develop trust. And sometimes those mistakes are even almost needed to make that relationship as strong as it could be, right? Yeah. I've had like times. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add one more thing to that as well. Things always come to me after, and then it's that's it. When you're structuring a lot of these agreements, there's certain key components, right? And obviously, and I would be really careful here how I say this, because it's like employment is incredibly important, very, very important. To provide a good quality job for a member and they can provide for their families is of most importance. But I think a lot of times communities feel that's sometimes the only thing that's put on the table. And it'll be really clear. In the case of DNA, because of the displacement and the destruction of the community, a lot of the members are residing outside of the region and are fully employed. So we don't have the massive unemployment, problems that maybe other communities might have. So in our case, what's key is revenue generation. And that scares a lot of people off. It just rubs them the wrong way. They don't want their back stiffens up. They don't want to talk about it. But it's like, I sometimes feel the employment piece is oftentimes a benefit to the company themselves, right? They've got a pool of labor right there that they can access. They don't have to fly people in from Newfoundland and then truck them in from, that's a great thing for First Nations, but it's also a great thing for the companies. The revenue generation piece is really important. Like DNA is trying to develop from scratch. We get limited support from government, so having own source revenues is the only way that we're gonna be able to develop in a way that meets the needs of the members that are trying to move back to the community. So that's not a scary word, it's something that's important. And in the case of Major, when we got the draft of the agreement, there was a piece there on that, which is great, because I mean, you didn't hide from that, right? So I just wanted to stress that's a really important piece for communities.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a bit to what Jordan was saying here. So, excuse me, a drilling project, in a lot of cases, people think, oh great, there's gonna be jobs available to community members, and in some cases there are. But as an example, the project that we recently completed with Vulcan was a little over, let's say 1,500 meters of drilling. Now that takes less than a month. So if you think about it in our situation, even if a perfect candidate is introduced to us from the community, we have pre-employment that we have to go through, we have training that we have to go through, then we have to get them, certified in Ontario Common Core, then we have to move them out to the drills, we have to shadow them for 3 days. All this is great on the employment side, but the problem is by the time we actually get him to a useful position, the project is stopped. And now so we've employed him for training, and then we've got nothing else for him. In a lot of cases, because of our size, we will then offer the individual an opportunity to work on another project, maybe outside of his home area. But that's why the different components of the agreement, be it revenue generation, be it employment, being it on bundling, and using local suppliers that are already in the area for excavator work or things like that, also need to be part of that, because not every drilling program is of a sufficient size or duration to really get people into the process and get them trained, and get them enough experience where they become valuable not only to a major drilling, but to the next drilling company or to whoever else is in the community. So it has to be a little bit more encompassing, and over the years we've learned that part of it. So
That's great. That was one question kind of later on, but I'll kind of go that direction right now. Just for some high level, talking about what in an agreement, and what are the high level things that people should be thinking about when developing agreements. Yeah, if you want to start.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, so we have, so the communities have, a good template agreement that we've, massaged over the years, and we think it's very good. It can always be improved, and we've seen other iterations, but the number one thing is the environment, like I stated, right? So it's ensuring that the exploration companies that are operating, as well as their subs, are operating in a way that takes care of the land and water. All of the tributaries around the site of Lake Nipigon flow into Lake Nipigon itself, which is of incredible importance to all the communities around the lake. So the environment's always number one. We enforce the highest standards, as well as ensuring that, like I said prior, members of Rocky Bay and Red Rock have actually people that go to the site periodically to make sure things are being done properly. So environment's key. Consultation is key. Understanding the expectations of the communities, which in our case we try to ensure that if there's activities happening on a project, that they come to the community and they explain to the members what's going on. We try to enforce that once a year. Communities don't even oftentimes have that ability to bring people in once a year. I'm just saying that if there's something happening and it's active, we might have a company twice a year. But to be able to come to the members and answer their questions directly. So obviously that does cost money. We don't expect them to pay for the whole cost of the meeting, but a portion of it is key, right? Because in the case of Sandpoint, we're displaced, so we have to have our meetings at a hotel. It costs money, right? Along with that, then there's the actual the benefit piece, I guess. I call it the accommodation piece, in the sense that, if the land's being, torn up, at least there's some benefit to the community itself, right? So that includes employments, that includes contracting opportunities for the community, and the ability to bring their partners to the table and provide, them opportunities on the work that's happening. And then of course there's some forms of revenue generation in there. We understand that exploration is not the phase of the project in which there's a lot of money happening. A lot of times they're raising money and they're bleeding it by exploring and drilling and everything else. We understand that, but there has to be some kind of monetary benefit to the communities, percentage of exploration budget, something like that. Another thing that we've done is shares in the company themselves, because and that was something that Actually, it's myself and a predecessor at Red Rock Indian Man, who's no longer there, but we were working closely together to develop these agreements. And it's the idea that it actually, the company has, the community has a stake in the exploration project itself, right? So if there's shares that the community can exercise when that company becomes more valuable, then you want to encourage that project goes ahead. You want to try to encourage those permits, right? So it's just it's making sure that the community feels involved in the development itself, and there's multiple ways to do that.
Okay, Jordan? Yeah, I'll ask then, either of you have anything else you wanted to add for the experience that you have developing agreements with communities? I know Jordan covered most of it, so if there's nothing else, it's all good, but I didn't know from your perspective if there was something.
The shares is a pretty critical piece, and it's been in all the agreements that I've worked through. Just having that joint, just being invested as a team in an area in seeing this project go forward. And yeah, that then communities get to participate in the upswing as well, and that's important. And for us as a company, I think how we map out communication is also important. Even just putting in there who are key points of contact, how often do we want to meet, what is the community's preference for X, Y, Z, really helps us then ensure that we are showing up in the right way in the process.
I think on the supplier side, it's again, just critical to know the path from permit to mine and understanding the different, there's gonna be a lot of drilling activity in the early stages of programs, but as the mine starts into the development stage, the drilling's gonna drop off. So single source partnerships are great, but they can also leave gaps for what the community, like that stream of as the thing builds. So once the construction stops, the drilling's gonna slow down. So the forward thinking of the communities to get in place, camp contractors if that's required, or security if that's required, or in some cases earthworks. There's a lot of earthworks that go into constructing a mine. So having that forward thought of what suppliers are going to be needed, not just the drilling side, but what suppliers are going to be needed as that project develops. It gets you ahead of the game, and it allows you to find, and develop good partnerships before they're immediately required. Because when they're immediately required, it's sometimes too late.
Just wanted to mention that, just really quickly, that we understand too, from the community level, that not all companies are the same, right? There are very small juniors and very large, well-funded juniors that are owned by major companies. Like there's a variety, and we get that, right? There's different CapExes. So we have standards in the agreement that we don't deviate from, but there are also things that we do bring up just for certain players that we might not to others, right? And some of the things we have in earlier agreements as well are bursaries for members to make sure that if members want to pursue post-secondary and especially in areas around the STEM subjects, science, whatever the STEM is, math, that they have an opportunity to do that, to get an education, a post-secondary education. And as well, in one of our earlier agreements, we had the setup of our development corporation. So BNA, Rocky Bay, and AZA First Nations collectively have a company called Three Nations Resources that we formed several years ago, and we had dollars in there to set that corporation up. And so there's different things you can put in an agreement, but it's not the same for every company. So I just wanted to say that.
And it's all about that relationship building and having a conversation to tweak those agreements. It's great. We had kind of skipped over to the agreement piece, and I wanted to go back about the actual process that the communities have developed. So when an exploration permit comes in, I might have to speak a little bit to it as well about the process. I mean, just over the years, you've kind of developed this. If you can speak of
So
the first things you do.
So we encourage any company from a staking level to come and speak with the communities, and we've had a lot of that. We've had a lot of small, mom and pop people that are out doing staking that come contact the communities even before the permitting stage, which I think is really important. It starts building that relationship really early. But when the permit, sometimes the first knowledge that we have of a company doing any work is the permit comes across comes across our desk, right? So we'll work with Nokiwan, we'll try to bring the communities together, we'll find out what the issues are. We have a layered process where we start with a memorandum of understanding with the companies. That gives us enough understanding that they, and comfort that they're gonna work with us on an exploration budget, or an exploration agreement, sorry, which is the phase 2, but that might take some time. And that might prevent the company from being able to raise money and be able to get out in the field and do some of this work, which is critical to kind of making these projects move forward. So we have this layered process. I don't know if that's gonna continue forever. We may get to the point, like, for example, I know Wagon Tribal Council out east basically says, you must sign an exploration agreement before you get your permit. And that's something that we have had a lot of conversations about internally, if you wanna move into that direction, but there are, there's a lot of give and take in this, and the companies, they want certainty, but the communities also want to make sure that they're gonna get an agreement, and it's not gonna be dragged out for years, right? So we struggle with that a little bit internally, but that's the process that we have right now in place.
Yeah, and sometimes the memorandum of understanding, it takes a little while to, like, a lot of time and capacity to even do that, right? But yeah, so the processes have, the ideal process would be the company would reach out to the communities, start building that relationship, the community, and we send out the memorandum of understanding, we meet on that, sign, and then once that's signed, then the agreement piece starts after that.
Right now, that's the process.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about after the exploration phase? I haven't actually.
Well, to be honest, in the case of Sandpoint, we have not had that opportunity to move on to the impact benefit agreement side. So we're looking forward to that. Has to happen because there's a lot of mining activity in the region. I know our neighbors, today have led the way in an excellent IBA arrangement that they have with the company up north. But in our particular area, the 4 communities, we're waiting for that project to move to the level where we can get an IBA in place. Hasn't happened yet. We're hoping it happens soon.
Do you have anything you'd like to add? We can move on.
What was the question?
Just about the process. The process, like, so I asked during other First Nations the process, but I'm wondering if we can give some feedback of how that works for the proponent and for you. Did it make things more clear? Was it easy for you?
Yeah, and I think we touched on this earlier, but how having that process in place made it really easy for us. And yeah, from that first meeting, we knew first we're going to work through the MOU, then the EA. In the meantime, we would keep our discussions going, and if we are going to submit a permit, then we're going to, if we haven't got the EA, then we're going to have an active conversation and dialogue around all that. And there was even some through that process between the permitting and just the active dialogue, some modifications made even to like when we're going to be in the field and how close we can be to bodies of water. And it came to be through the relationship even without necessarily the EA being done yet. So it's really about acting in good faith and just being committed to that process. It's super clear, and I have also worked with the Wagon Tribal Council, and both of those processes really do help companies for sure.
So we've all worked with Wagon Tribal Council, that's a good thing. I think on the supplier side, the agreements are a little bit different because everybody, if you're simply selling the product, it's a different style agreement than if you're a contract service, then if you're what you're doing. On the drilling side of it, we've had, sometimes we get a joint venture, full joint venture agreement that wants a 50-50 sort of split. Sometimes these agreements have to have language in them to allow the First Nations to buy in to the drills or to buy into developing their own technology or their own. We've helped set up 2 Indigenous drilling companies over the past 6 years. One of them is still in business. Unfortunately, the junior market kind of gets tired and one of them's out of business now. But we help them acquire the expertise to try to run them themselves, and it can be successful. But that's a different layered agreement. Some of the communities just want a very simple MOU. If it's a smaller program and it's just a short duration, they don't want a big complex agreement. So I think suppliers need to be flexible. It's different than the MOUs and the EAs, but there still has to be layers there to meet the needs of what the community wants and at the stage of what the program is.
Thanks so much. We've talked a lot about the benefits, and clearly there are the benefits outweigh the challenges, but I want to ask each of you to talk about if there were any challenges with this process, or working with First Nations in general, or working with industry in general, some of the challenges, and how did you overcome it?
Oh God, we don't have enough time. There's always challenges, and I think we learn over time. I would say one of the things that we stumble on more often than not is where we've mentioned good communication is critical. Everyone's got a busy life, and Jordan and Chief Hardy and some of the others wear so many hats that the little bit of this program sometimes goes to the side, and you know, we've got problems on our side, and we've got business on our side that we're trying to deal. So the challenge is staying focused enough to maintain the communication and making sure that the community is aware of what you're doing. I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges we have, because life is just busy, and we all have cell phones, and we all have places to be. And so I think staying focused on maintaining those relationships is critical.
People in the body can give a tip or two of how you've been successful to do that?
I'm not really successful at doing that. I think, and I will be honest, I'm getting told more and more often that there's this thing on my computer right beside my Outlook mailbox. It's called a schedule, and I'm being told to use it. So yeah, it's difficult. We all have our own. You know, some people write a lot of things on paper. Some people use a day timer. Inherently, I think for myself personally, it's just about not overloading myself and understanding. Setting a day aside to reach out to my partner communities, and you know, I don't always get a hold of them, but at least I have a record that I've tried, and then it reminds me to go back to them. And sometimes people are on holidays, sometimes you'll lose that communication, but it's just about, you know, once a month, at least trying to just re-engage where I can.
Maybe I'll just speak a little bit to from my perspective, because I've been there, you're challenged to even respond, and I really appreciate when companies send an email, but like other ways of communicating as well. A phone call goes a long way, even a text message, or hearing about an event like this. There's at least one person in this room that flew all the way here because, hey, this is the best way to have that communication is in person, and I know my communities are going to be in this room, so just putting that effort out there really helps a lot. Do you want to go next? The challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Sure. So typically the people, talking about agreements and building relationships in, for the community or for the company are not the same people generally who are actually out in the field doing the work. And so it's really on the company side, making sure that the field team understands the commitments that have been made to communities and are actually upholding those in the field, around especially environment, for example. So that's why I think it's good when we work with companies that communities also have a good relationship with and trust on the environmental side, because then it sort of helps with that communication piece and then trust all around. But I think just ensuring that what's happening in the field matches your values as a company and what you've told the community that you're going to do, and making sure juniors are small and sometimes a little disorganized, no offense, and we are all doing the best we can with limited resources, right? And so making sure you're not going to necessarily talk to the whoever's the head at site every single day, but it is important that you understand what is going on in the field, and you want to hear that from your team, not from a community member who drove by and saw something that was concerning. You want to know what's going on. So really keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the field, and then making sure you get ahead of anything. If there's something you need to tell, then you should talk to your partners here, on the community side, and say this is what you should know. So I think sometimes that can be challenging, but there are ways that we're getting better at that in the exploration space. But making sure that we're all on board with the commitments in the agreement is something that can be a challenge.
Yeah, so I echo John's comment about the scheduling. The number one challenge that communities have is time. It's the number one issue. Scheduling goes along with that, right? I have six staff under me. They work 24/7. I could hire 6 more right now, but I don't even have time to put a job description together, or we don't have money for it, so it doesn't matter. But I just the point that you just don't have time for everything that we have to do, and is a small percentage of everything that I do, right? So, time is our number one challenge. The political challenges are things that I feel we can always overcome. That's something that, you know, we can work together, and like I said previously, if it becomes something that's attractable, we can go to the chiefs, and then they can be brought in to try to solve some of these matters. You know, I mentioned the challenges of the MOU process. That's, again, it's worked. In some cases, we've signed an exploration agreement with one meeting. It was the very quick. Yeah, it sounds fantastic, perfect, signed, done. They understand the purpose of it, the reason for it, they get it. We've worked with other companies. It's literally dragged on for years, and it's caused the chiefs to wonder if the MOU process that we have in place is a good one, and maybe we should eliminate it altogether. And just basically, you will not do anything until you sign this, right? And you don't want to do that, but sometimes you have one, you know, incident that kind of leads to that, right? So there are a lot of challenges. I think the scheduling one, until, you know, government realizes the importance of economic developments and consultation, and we, you know, appreciate the dollars that we do receive, but all the communities face the same challenges of being overworked, and yeah, so that's just an issue that we have to keep facing. So.
Working together helps build that capacity, right?
You know what, actually, I'm glad you said that, because we're so busy, sometimes you can only have one community can come to the table, maybe, for a meeting, right? Because the other two are busy, they're doing something else. So having that trust is extremely important, because if everyone can't come to that meeting, they know they can trust the individual that is there from Community X, that they're gonna be able to pass that information back. There's no side deals happening, we're all, you know, we all trust one another, that we can do that. So it took some time to get to that point, but we're definitely there now. And there's a lot of meetings that I will take when my counterparts aren't able to make it, they'll take when I'm not there. So that's important.
Thanks so much, and we're pretty much at the end of our time, but I did want to ask 1 to 2 sentences each only, because we have 1 minute left here. One piece of advice that you would like the audience to take away with them today. Start with you, John.
Ask as many questions as you can. Reach out and talk. I mean, it'll start the process. You might not, look, the answers may not always be one you want to hear, but it's a step to the next question. It's a step to the next process. So just don't ever be afraid to ask the questions from the suppliers, from the mining companies, or from the communities.
So this is really for exploration companies, but as soon as you stake your claims, as close to the moment that you do that as possible, reach out to local communities, find out who they are, and reach out, introduce yourselves, have a meeting as quickly as possible. And the 3 cups of tea is something that I like to use, where first time, and I actually think I learned this from Shane Manson, first time you meet with a community, you know, it's really just about listening, as John said, and just listen. Maybe you don't even want to talk about business, you know, maybe you just want to learn about people, who they are, what they like, and really focus on other things and care about what what's important to them. And then the second time, maybe, you know, you have more conversations about things that are not business, but maybe you just plant the seed about it. And maybe on the third time, then start bringing those issues to the table, because it's really important to focus on people over everything else first. So that's just one thing that I take away.
Yeah, I would just say that 50% of something, or 33.3% of something, or 25% of something is better than 0% of nothing. So working together, understanding that a project is not going to move ahead unless you work as a collective and cooperatively and on an equal basis. You see that happening in projects across the country. So I guess my advice to the communities is find a way to work together and move things forward.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was great last advice. I really like that 3 cups of tea too. I never break that one. So we do have a few minutes for questions. So we have a microphone at the front of the room here. If anybody has some questions, please come and line up. You were that good. Oh, maybe there's a couple people walking in.
I'm like, so, great presentation, thank you very much. Under the current Ontario regime, somebody sitting at their laptop can go in and stake a claim. Then they have to come to you with a negative in your sites. How do you deal with that?
Can you clarify what you mean by negative?
Well, they didn't come ahead of time to say, do you mind if we come into your territory and stake a claim? They stake it, then they say, by the way, we've staked a claim in your neighborhood, we'd like to talk to you.
What's the question? It's a good question, and it's a common question. I think, when is the appropriate time? In the current situation, as you said, the process doesn't require it, and in some cases it's a bit controversial to go ahead and talk about where you plan to stake, just because of the nature and the competitiveness of it. We know that it's starting to change in BC, we've seen that, and if I had to put a number on it, I'd say 3 to 5 years, it'll be probably the case, don't quote me on it, but across all of Canada, where consultation will start prior to claim staking. You can see that it's moving in that direction. It's not there yet. Is it a best practice? Absolutely. It would be better to do that, but it's tricky right now to do that. I will say though, given that there's a space between when you stake a claim as a company and when you apply for a permit to do drilling or like mechanical stripping, whatever it is. There could be sometimes 2 years between when you stake a claim and when you put a permit application in. And if communities are only hearing about your presence 2 years after you stake your claims, when you need a permit, you're just knocking on the door for the first time, it does signal a little bit around how much you value building that relationship, versus if you start on day one when you stake a claim and you said, look, we want to work with you now until that point. Then the idea is that when you get to the point of submitting a permit application, hopefully the community's actually already seen it ahead of time, maybe even reviewed it, and you're submitting it sort of all as a team in a way.
Ian, that's an excellent question, and it's the electronic staking system is usually problematic, and communities have expressed a lot of concern with that. I mean, you could be halfway across the world, not even residing in the region and staking claims, right? So like the actual relationship piece is completely lacking in those cases. So it's a big problem. I mean, Tim showed the map earlier about just how many claims are in the vicinity on the east side of Lake Dipping. It's enormous, and we don't know who half these folks are. So it's a huge problem. It's a fight with the ministry that we're gonna have to keep having.
Next.
Thanks for the presentation. Jason Thompson, Water Supplies, Water Engineering. We talk a lot about impact benefit agreements and exploration agreements. How are we tracking those? How are we scoring to ensure that we're keeping score of the game?
Do you mean tracking them against each other, or once it's implemented, how?
Once it's implemented, how are we ensuring that the deliverables are being met? And are there consequences to not achieving those deliverables?
Well, I'll just start. It needs to be tracked, and I think I'll go back to my earlier comment about how taxed the communities are, and their oftentimes inability to follow every single agreement that's signed and where they're at, and has this or that clause been met. It is a problem, right? So I think having the right partner on the other side to say, we have to make sure, and this hasn't been done or that hasn't been is equally as important. Not just from the communities hammering the table saying, hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It's the company saying, we forgot to do that. We're going to get on that. It's got to work both ways. But implementation of the agreement, it's critically important.
Yeah, I agree, and it is a challenge. I mean, you think the hardest part is signing the agreement. It's actually not. It's once the agreement is signed, right? And so how we manage that generally, who also wears too many hats and has too much of a busy schedule, would try usually with each agreement to put some sort of document together with dates, right? So by this date, or something is supposed to be quarterly, or and then it just comes down to who is best at making sure that we stay on track. And again, back to the relationship. If somebody misses a critical date, for example, of implementation, it's how do we then just figure out, get it done, and keep moving forward without just still in good faith. But it can be really tricky because there's a lot of commitments in these documents together, right? And yes, to your point.
Thank you. I got one more question. So it's around procurement. And as a private business owner, we face some challenges as an Indigenous business owner around access to opportunities. John knows who I am. I reach out quite often, and I'm a dog with no one. But, you know, again, one of the challenges we face as an Indigenous business oftentimes, and it comes, we're not just singling out major drilling or anybody, but if we're not a part of the impacted communities, and I've heard it from a number of my colleagues who are also Indigenous business owners, if we're not a part of the impacted communities, you know, oftentimes we're on the outside looking in, right? Or we get called when there's only a project. If I only brought my wife over and I needed her to join me for dinner, I would be married 28 years. So that methodology has to change. It has to change around being inclusive. You talk about relationships, that's relationship building, is that when you're using a supplier or a service company every day of the week, right? Not just when there's a project. And my question in that regard is, what are you doing to ensure Indigenous procurement is taking place? Because that's part of the reconciliation in Call to Action 92, right? And I want to understand, what is your plan? You know, how are we integrating a lot of this? Again, because a lot of our communities are still living in poverty. When we talk about prosperity like we are today, we got to move from poverty to prosperity. And that takes action and it takes courage. And for us as an Indigenous business owner, we're late to the game. You got master service agreements in place, blah, blah, blah. And it's barrier after barrier. And what I'm challenging every business that's here looking to partner with any Indigenous business, is identify those barriers and come up with a solution, right? The challenges we face as Indigenous businesses are great. Lateral violence due to the effects of colonization, right? I'm an Indigenous business owner. Majority of my staff are Indigenous. We're engineering, 80% of our staff are Indigenous. We're moving the needle, right? When I come to hear conversations, I want to understand, how are we moving the needle? What are we doing? Good question.
Well, in full disclosure, Jason and me have had some conversations, and I was gonna look them up here during the show. As companies, like I said, the smaller the program, we just tend to bring everything in we need, we finish it off, and we take everything we need home. We need to be better at identifying those communities. Now, one thing I would example, a fuel supplier is something we're gonna need every day, so we're gonna reach out pretty tight on that. If we have access issues and we need earthworks done, that's another one we're gonna reach out pretty quick on. But depending on what the Indigenous business is, we have to be better at picking some of the small ones as well. Even if it's a little bit inconvenient to set up a new vendor, to do things like that, we have to try to push through. And it's, every company has layers, we have layers as well. What I want to happen is not necessarily what the boots on the ground, that they just want to be efficient and get out the door. So it's about continued conversations, Jason, and it's about continuing to, we have to reach out to the communities in some cases and get the list of the companies that they would identify as individual businesses that we should be maybe reaching out to or working with. So it takes time, it takes focus, and again, we need to be better at it, but I think every day, every step we get there.
Yeah, and I would just say that, like, juniors are gonna lean on companies like Major and Geotech Services. We don't, I mean, our juniors are very small, very few number of people. And so when we go into the field, we are hiring subcontractors and contractors. So we lean on them around these issues, but they are also our concern, right? Having, diverse workforces, working with, being able to hire from the communities we work with and around, is something that's important, but we also don't have, for example, even when I worked at Newmont Goldcorp, this was an issue, and we actually had revenue streams, we actually had capacity, and these companies, these small companies don't have the resources to take a step back, let's say, and look at a strategy for hiring Indigenous businesses, which I wish we did, but we don't. So I think a question back would be, how do we solve this problem where juniors would need to be able to find a quick place that they could reach out and actually find a bunch of Indigenous businesses that are kind of low-hanging fruit, ready to go, because I would be pushing that everywhere with junior companies, and I would be happy to be a facilitator of that.
Yeah, I would just echo, Jason's comments. Like, that's a critical part of our agreements that we put in place with companies. not only ensuring that the partnerships that are developed by the communities, that they have first kick at the can for a lot of this work, but also Indigenous entrepreneurs within the communities themselves that might have their own businesses, that they also have opportunities. So I totally hear you on that. I know there's a lot of work happening, on the provincial level right now with, I know Anita and Koo are doing a lot of work on the procurement front. I know there's been some progress at the federal level, but it's an ongoing fight that we're well versed in, and we keep joining with you on that. So.
Alright, we got the cut here. So I want to say thank you to the panelists for providing all that great information for us, and hopefully everybody here can take some of the information back with them to implement it. So Chief much for that. Lunch is going to be served at the back of the room,
Just outside.
outside these doors here. So please grab your food and come back. Thank you for their luncheon keynote speaker with Ontario Mining Association President Chris Hodgson, and that begins at 1:20. Thank you very much. You got it.